The NFC West has always produced some prominent teams in the conference as a whole. This year, we're going to have some teams that are going to look quite the same coming off of 2023, and a few teams that are going to look quite different, especially at the head coaching position. We're going to kind of go through each team, give our bull case and bear case for each one, talk about some of their win totals, the odds to win the divisions, some previews, some statistical breakdowns from the numbers that we get from our projections and our models, and kind of go through a forecast of what we think is going to happen in 2024 based off of some offseason moves, some projections, some momentum, and all of that. So a pretty informal show. We always love doing this. We break down every division before the regular season starts. It's always a good time kind of breaking in some of the teams, some of our models, some of our stats before and trying to make some guesses about how some teams are going to perform in 2024. So before we do that, a couple of things. The show is brought to you by Not Beer. Shout out Corbin Smith. Great water. Highly recommend. It is not beer. It is sparkling water for all of those who love to have something in your hand that's not alcoholic, but great taste, great carbonation nonetheless. So, Brendan, before we dive into the NFC West, how we doing, brother?
I'm dialed.
Dialed in?
Yeah, it's almost August.
You know, getting ready to call some heat for the NFC West.
I'm getting ready to call some heat, man. You know, I've always loved this division for some odd reason. I don't know why. Probably
it's a fun division. It's a fun division, and I, you know, there are, of course, a few other divisions where, you know, the rivalries are just unmatched. You know, every game kind of feels like more important than some of the other regular season games, of course. But I mean, we've seen in this division, anybody is susceptible to beating anybody. You know, the 49ers obviously a dominant force to be reckoned with, but we've seen the Rams capable of beating anybody. We've seen the Seahawks willing to wake up and take it to anybody. Even the Cardinals, you know, we have some surprising wins from last year, and so it's always fun. There's a lot of talent spread out here through the division, and of course we have some new head coaches, new offensive coordinators, or relatively new. You know, a few going on into their second year to be excited about, and hopefully building off of some of the success they found in 2023. So we'll start from the top with, of course, the San Francisco 49ers. You know, they had a great season last year, albeit disappointing. I know they really were kind of hoping for it all. I thought they were going to get it all. I thought they were the most well-rounded, most robust team in the NFL. But of course, that Chiefs magic kind of denied them there at the end. But they are actually going to return quite a bit from that successful 2023 team. You know, if we're going to focus on who they lost, they did lose some key pieces on defense, notably Arik Armstead, Javon Kinlaw, Chase Young, and Randy Gregory. So they do have some puzzle pieces to put together for the defense, but I think that they'll figure out a way nonetheless. If we look at some of their offseason additions on the offensive side of the ball, they added Logan Thomas at tight end, Ezekiel Turner at linebacker, Rocky Sin at cornerback from the Ravens. I thought that was a huge pickup for the defense. I know that they lost some big bodies underneath, but adding Rocky Sin to the secondary, I think definitely helps nonetheless. And Jordan Elliott, defensive lineman over from the Browns, that I think is going to maybe fill some holes as well. But before we get into any of the numbers, projections, kind of what we think about the win totals, Beach, quick synopsis about the 49ers and what you expect heading into 2024.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like everyone's on the same page with me. Like, I've never wanted a regime to win a Super Bowl so bad in my life. I've never wanted, like, Kyle Shanahan, Christian McCaffrey, Brock Purdy, George Kittle. Like, I've never wanted and their team is so good every year.
It is.
And they never get there. They just never get there, and it's so frustrating. And I know everyone's tired of the Chiefs winning, so I know almost everybody was rooting for them last year in the Super Bowl. But you know, I don't really see anything too major going on that'll change up what we've seen in previous history with the Shanahan run team. The defense those are some key players up front. So the only thing that I would wonder about is if their defense is less efficient this year, if they can play catch-up ball, because you know they've got Purdy back there, who basically was just, you know, I know he like graded really well as a quarterback and a passer, but he didn't have to come from behind and win games and stuff like that because they were pretty much even or in the lead for a lot of their stuff. So I'd be interested to see what he what he can do if the defense is lacking and they have to do a little more of that comeback.
Yeah. So the offense is kind of fun to think about because if you look at the skill players, well, of course Brock Purdy is returning, and there's no uncertainty about the quarterback position. I think, we obviously can debate Brock Purdy and what we think of him as a quarterback, but I think now he's established himself as somebody who's very capable of winning. I mean, he was in the Super Bowl and just a few short plays away from winning the Super Bowl. So I think if you're still questioning Brock Purdy's ability to lead this team to the biggest stage, you're quite frankly in the wrong. So just throwing that out there, I think we're all comfortable with Brock Purdy and we're confident in his abilities to distribute the ball and execute Kyle Shanahan's offense accordingly and swiftly. So looking at their skill position, really everybody's the same. They did lose Ray McLeod at wide receiver, but they just added Ricky Pearsall. So, and I think that's actually an offensive upgrade due to Ricky's skill set. If you watch him at the University of Florida, the dude he's an older guy. He was in college for 4 or 5 years, but he's kind of a slot receiver. He's a route specialist, and dude's got sticky hands. And so I really do think that Shanahan loves that kind of profile. Whereas you have guys like Brandon Ayuk, who's also a route runner, a dynamic guy who can stretch the field. Debo, who's just the ultimate gadget player you can do anything with. So you kind of have different facets in the receiving corps. And of course, George Kittle, and then they added Logan Thomas. So strong tight ends nonetheless. I fully expect this offense to really come out firing all the same. Offensive line is mostly the same, led up by Trent Williams. He is sitting out due to contract-based purposes, but I fully expect him to, get that resolved and, move on nonetheless. So we at Statletics actually have them projected for 12.1 wins. Their over-under, their Vegas win total is 11.5. So this one was interesting because their schedule to me is actually a little more difficult seemingly than it was last year, even though we do project them for barely over 12 wins. It's they start off interestingly enough with the Jets, and then they go to Minnesota, then to LA to play the Rams. So I wouldn't say that's the easiest start, depending on how the Jets are, and of course games between the 49ers and the Rams are always competitive, no matter how good or how bad either one of the teams may be. But 11.5 is the number. They're obviously the heavy favorites to win the division. The best odds I can find was minus 195 over at FanDuel, and it's even steeper odds elsewhere. So 11.5 wins. If you take a look at their schedule, Beach, we have them projected at just barely over 12. What's your thoughts here? Do you like that number? Do you not like it? Do you think they go north, south? What you thinking?
Yeah, I agree. Especially with the extra game that was added a couple years ago. I agree with the over. What Scarlett says, and
Scarlett.
I just really am feeling now more than ever they're in win now mode. McCaffrey's not getting any younger. Kittle isn't getting any younger. They're going to have to pay either Ayuk, Debo, and Purdy if they can even do that while trying to keep the defense together. So, I think they're in win now mode. I think that they throw the kitchen sink at it this season, and hopefully they get it done.
So I definitely agree with that. I think they are more than likely going to sell out to try and make it to the big stage. Now, the reason I say that is because they have Brock Purdy on his rookie contract. This is the last year that they'll be able to do so. I think that the 49ers are going to try and make another blockbuster McCaffrey-ish type move just because they can. They're going to try and do what the Rams did. They're going to, if you think about it, what the Rams did back when they won the Super Bowl against the Bengals, they sold out that year, had hardly any draft picks over the next couple of drafts to really work with. But what did it cost them? Well, a Super Bowl, really. So I think they're going to kind of take that same approach. They might be a little more conservative than the Rams were back when they did that in 2020, I believe. But I do think that the 49ers are going to sell out. They may take it a bit easier in the regular season in terms of injuries. They may not necessarily. One thing the Chiefs did, I don't want to bounce back and forth, but one thing the Chiefs do that I really respect is they kind of trust the process. They know that their team, the base core of it, they trust their coaches, they trust their front office to get the backup players that they need to just win enough to get to the playoffs and put themselves in position. Obviously, they want the first seed and stuff, and they often get it. But they never really force their star players to get out there earlier than what they need them for. So I think the 49ers should at least try and adhere to that kind of approach. The 49ers, talking about some of their statistical metrics, they led the league in offensive EPA per play. Naturally, if they lead it per play, they're going to lead it in per pass and per rush. So they were one in both categories. They were ninth overall in EPA per play allowed on the defensive side of the ball. I'm worried that number on the defense side of the ball is going to go down a little bit, but if you're into fantasy football and stuff, I think this opens up the gate for maybe some higher scoring games. Maybe we don't see the pure dominance that we saw last year, but I think this offense in an offense-centric league is only going to get better than last year, which is a scary thought. So, whereas in the past, where defenses, had, we hear the old anecdote, defenses win championships. Well, that's true in a sense, but it doesn't weigh as much as it used to, back in like the 80s. So, 49ers.
The game and the rules have just changed to tailor more to the offense.
Yeah,
that's
now defense is, if you can have a defense that can get a stop, more often than not. Whereas it feels like offenses are scoring at will sometimes. It's kind of crazy because if you can hold a team to like 24 points or less, that's great. Whereas, a decade ago, it's not, which it just blows my mind. I know a lot of people would argue against that, but I'm the 49ers, for me, it's tough to lean one way or the other. Our projections are right around the over-under there. They do play a difficult schedule. I mentioned how they started, and then right in the meat of it, they go to the 12th man and play Seattle, which might be sneaky good, versus Kansas City, then versus Dallas. Then they go to Tampa Bay, back home against Seattle, at Green Bay, at Buffalo. That's kind of a stretch right there in the middle. So if they're facing any sort of injuries or any sort of drama, Brandon Ayuk still wants to act a fool. It could be tough sledding for them right there at the beginning, but I think they'll recoup and recover. I don't have a particular lean each way or whichever way, but of course, whenever that's the case, I lean with Scarlet. I'm going to go over. So that's it for the 49ers. Any closing thoughts before we move on to Sean McVay's Rams?
No, just that I hope that I hope the Lions are back in the NFC Championship, and I hope whoever wins that game will win it all. That's all I have to say.
Yeah. I'm hoping for. I have a lot of high expectations for this year. I really do. There are a handful of teams that I'm really rooting for and hoping for improved success. And I think I'll be thoroughly disappointed if some of those particular teams don't take that next step. But
right.
Hey, we're talking about the NFC West. So moving on to the Rams. Last year, the Rams kind of made a fun push in the playoffs. They made it to the wild card round after finishing 10-7 in the regular season. They really put a run for their money against the Lions. Man, I thought they had it. But hey, nonetheless, Sean McVay always puts this team in positions to win. They had a decent draft. They drafted Jared Verse in the first round, defensive lineman out of Florida State. So they're really just strengthening that defense up. It seems like they're kind of comfortable with what they have on offense out of Puka Nacua and a healthy Cooper Kupp coming back, and they're going to try and make the most out of this last 2 years of Matt Stafford. They did draft Blake Corum in the third round from Michigan, but he should complement Kyron Williams really well at the running back position. They did add Tre'Davious White, defensive back. He's kind of coming off some injuries. Obviously, he's from the Bills. Very prominent defensive back. We'll still see if he has some juice in the tank. He may be getting a little old, also coming off that knee injury. Not too sure. But off-season losses, we didn't really see anything too crazy. They lost Ben Skoranek, wide receiver. He was more of like a third, fourth string guy, on the field quite a bit, but not very active in the passing game. So I think we're going to see kind of the same team. They did lose Raheem Morris and their passing game coordinator over to the Falcons. So, but nonetheless, I still think all in all, this team is going to look relatively the same. Sean McVay calls the plays. So I don't really expect a change fundamentally there with the X's and O's. So before I get into any of the numbers and projections and whatnot, Brendan, quick synopsis about the Rams. How do you feel about them going into the 2024 season? Let me know.
Yeah, there's always another mini McVay waiting to come up in the ranks, so I wouldn't be worried about that. I will say that I could be a little worried about what goes on the defensive side with Raheem Morris not there. That's neither that or there. I'm looking for a little bit of improvement almost. I mean, I know, if Cooper Kupp can stay healthy for a whole season, that'd be huge. Him and Puka together. So I worry about Stafford being old, and just what that defense can do. So, I think it'll look similar. Do you have their strength of schedule pulled up by chance?
Yep, I do. Let me get it real quick. So, the Rams are facing the 12th ranked strength of schedule in terms of difficulty based off of win percentage of last year. And then based on some of our projections, we actually have them adjusted for the 9th or 10th toughest strength of schedule. So kind of middle of the road based on last year. And then our projections kind of put them in, not the worst of the worst, but it's not going to be easy. So,
yeah, I mean, it's based on last year, but, I was trying to, do they not open up with the Jets or first couple weeks? That's the team that I think of based on last year. It's like the Jets.
No,
they open up.
They travel to Detroit and go play in Detroit. Then they travel to Arizona, play Arizona. Then they play the 49ers. Then they go to Chicago. And then they play Green Bay. That's the first 5 weeks before they hit a bye week. So, I'm already seeing 3 games in which they're gonna really, really gonna have to put their best foot forward. So there's really a chance as they start 3-2, 2-3 even. But I mean, we've seen them do the same, nonetheless. But kind of going off of that point, I mean, I fully expect this team to still produce on the offensive side of the ball. Really, their core skill players are all the same. I mean, you look at their wide receiver core: Puka Nacua, Cooper Kupp, Tutu Atwell, Demarcus Robinson. Yeah, that dog.
Beast.
Tyler Higbee over at tight end, followed by Colby Parkinson, Hunter Long. We already talked about the running backs. They also added Boston Scott, gadget player. So I think that'll be great. I think that'll be great for Sean McVay. I know he always loves guys who can come in there and immediately make an impact in the X's and O's. So
I do want to say something really important. We have 2 of Harrison's favorite first-time touchdown scorers on this roster with Tyler Higbee and Colby Parkinson. So that's pretty important.
Yeah,
that's pretty important for Harrison.
Yep. I have a back pocket of first-time touchdown scorers who have treated me really relatively well over the past few years,
and they're all tight ends.
They're all tight ends, yeah. One of them being Will Dissly. Anytime it's a primetime Seahawks game at Seattle, bet Will Dissly first-time touchdown because it's going to happen. He only scores once or twice a season, and it's going to be in the primetime game at the 12th man. It's always like a Monday night. So
very good.
Yeah. But no, yeah, their strength of schedule is kind of grueling. I over Scarlet Caller, that's what we call our model, has them projected for 7.9 wins. The Vegas win total is actually 8.5 consensus across the board. So the model actually likes them to fall under, but I just don't see them falling below expectations. Because year in and year out, Beach, the Rams always they don't exceed expectations, but they meet them and then slightly bit more. I feel like Sean McVay always puts them in a position to succeed. So my bull case for the Rams is that the skill positions are all the same nonetheless. They have the chemistry, and of course they have one of the best play callers calling that offense. So they're always going to be in a position to win from that standpoint. To your point, the bear case for the Rams, the defense and the age. You have Matthew Stafford if he can't avoid injury. And then, of course, Cooper Kupp, if he can't avoid injury again. Kyren Williams, if he can't avoid injury. I mean, these are all guys who have consistently battled against injury after injury and can't seem to stay on the field for longer than a few game stretch. So, that's really what it comes down to is because from a data perspective, I mean, the Rams actually proved themselves to be extremely well in terms of EPA. They were actually top 10. 9th overall in overall EPA per play, and they were 6th overall in EPA per pass. So Matthew Stafford is like sometimes he can be erroneous and throw some picks here and there, but this guy knows how to drive the football down the field, and I'm confident in that. But I think that, going back to the whole bull and bear case, my bull case for the Rams is that they can win games. They have the competency to do so, with the coaching staff and the guys on in the skill positions, and the ability to do so. But just it all depends on how healthy they are and how well the defense can hold up. That's really what it boils down to. I mean, they statistically project as one of the better teams, one of the top 10 teams on the offensive side of the ball, just on the latter half of the league and the defensive side of the ball. So, just that in conjunction with the tougher schedule, it's hard for me to think that they exceed expectations without a reasonable doubt. But I don't trust the model in this instance. I actually do think they win, 9 or 10 games again.
Yeah.
If they stay healthy.
Yeah. So my thinking about it is the probability of them going over this, in my opinion, is no injuries the whole season. Just because I know we're talking about the beginning of the beginning of season gauntlet. 5 of their last 7 games are Eagles, at the Saints, Bills, 49ers, Jets. And they go to the 49ers and to the Jets at the end. And I just think that those are 2 really hard stretches, and even if they aren't injured, those are really difficult. So I'm gonna lean towards the under here. Actually, I'm gonna go against you and go under the 8.5 here.
Hey, somebody's got to do it. Somebody's got to do it. They're plus 360 over at Caesars. That's the best odds I can find to win the division. I have no interest in taking this because I actually think it's going to be. I actually think I find more value in the Seahawks and then maybe even a Cardinal sprinkle to win. But just because it's so heavy on the 49ers, I'd rather go for value in the ones that have a lot more uncertainty. So speaking of uncertainty, let's go over to the Seahawks. New head coach Mike McDonald, former Ravens defensive coordinator, is now leading the charge for the 12th man. Offensive coordinator Ryan Grubb. You remember where he came from? Trivia time. Let me know.
University of Washington.
That's right. So he coached over with Kalen DeBoer with over at UW, and he was the guy behind Michael Penix's success, I guess. We'll see. There's really not much on him outside of what he did at Washington. He has, nothing that I could trace of substance in the NFL. So, but if he calls plays similarly to how he did at Washington, then I fully expect him to use Geno to stretch the field. We saw Michael Penix as a kind of really just launch the ball downfield, constantly stretch the field, use his weapons on the perimeter to stretch defenses out vertically. So we'll see if he takes that same approach with Geno Smith and they're really, really solid wide receiver core. They are returning DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, and JSN. So it's going to be a fun year for the Seahawks. I think there's going to be some growing pains, obviously, with a first-time new head coach. But before I get into any of the numbers, any of the stats, Beach, what you think about the Seahawks heading into 2024?
Yeah, I really like the changing regime with Pete Carroll heading out of town and Mac McDonald. Is it Mike or Mac? It's Mac, right? Mac McDonald.
McDonald, MAC.
Mac McDonald coming in here. He was the defensive coordinator at the Ravens. And I just want to put this thought into your head. I love the idea of a defensive coach coming into a head coaching spot because he's got his hand in everything. And if you think about it, he had one of the best defenses in the league last year. So he knows what things he hated to defend against. So you give that to Ryan Grubb over there and you say, go play with that. Go play with that. I hated defending that, and then see what they can cook up. And I really like that. I wouldn't think that he would have a huge hand on the offensive side, but Washington had an explosive offense last year, and hopefully Ryan Grubb can bring that to the Seahawks this year. They've got the weapons. So I expect a big jump this year from JSN, hoping they'll run more 3 wide receiver sets to get him on the field. And
so
it'll be nice.
From you're right. The when he was coaching for the Ravens last year, the Ravens had the second best EPA per play allowed, only behind the Browns, barely behind the Browns, for the best defense and EPA allowed. So, but we try to prioritize making the case for both sides too. So, I think his knowledge is there. But he is inheriting one of the worst defenses that the league saw in 2023. The Seahawks were 4th worst in EPA per play allowed on the defensive side of the ball. So it's nothing good. It's nothing good. They also lost their team captain on the defensive side of the ball, and Bobby Wagner, to the Commanders. Now he's a bit old, so I don't want to say that that's a huge hit. But I mean, with a guy who has a knowledge of the defensive side of the game like Bobby Wagner does, and who will lead that defense, that is still kind of a hit. They lost Devin Bush to the Browns, Mario Edwards to the Texans, Jordan Brooks to the Dolphins, and Jamal Adams, of course, to the Titans. So it's kind of a brutal loss, or brutal offseason for the defensive side of the ball in terms of losses. Now, they did add quite a bit. They added Jonathan Hankins from the Cowboys. That's one of my favorite additions. Tyrell Dodson from the Bills. Rayshon Jenkins at safety. And then, of course, they had a few guys that they took from the draft. Of course, our guy, Byron Murphy. So one thing that I do want to point out about this team is last year, I don't think we saw the full potential of the offensive side of the ball, with Geno Smith kind of being banged up, intermittently in and out. I don't think that whatever game that they were trying to run was optimal for Geno Smith and that offensive side of the ball skill set. So I think that there's really some untapped potential, some untapped playmaking abilities if Ryan Grubbs can come in here and call the right games, utilize DK to stretch the field, really capitalize on one-on-one opportunities there, utilize JSN down low and in the slot. Tyler Lockett is a mastermind as a route runner. And Geno Smith, I mean, not last year, but the year before last year when he kind of had the breakout season. I mean, he had he was top 10 in some of the key quarterback metrics. He was great at generating EPA on the offensive side of the ball. He could really stretch the field and get it downfield at a very, very successful or high successful rate. So I really have high hopes for this offensive side of the ball. I was disappointed with their performance last year, but it really kind of hinges on how aggressive Ryan Grubb is willing to be, and if he can utilize his talent well, because they can really open the floodgates with it. But my concern is the defensive side of the ball. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Just speak one more thing on the offensive side. We've talked about it before, but the difference between college and the NFL is in college, you can have a scheme and nobody can beat you. In the NFL,
yep,
you gotta give your best players the ball, and I feel like DK and JSN, specifically those two, have been pretty underutilized since they've been with the Seahawks, and I'm really looking for Ryan Grubbs to get them in some more situations to get the ball in their hands. So
yeah, and then they, of course, they have great running backs too. They have Kenneth Walker and then Zach Charbonnet coming into his sophomore year. I have high hopes for that backfield too. I mean, Kenneth Walker is not a guy who's going to consistently excel in the run game, but he is one of the best backs in terms of breaking off very, very explosive runs. And then Zach Charbonnet, we saw him kind of excel later in the year in the passing game, so I expect him to be that kind of third down back and guy who catches a lot of balls out of the backfield. I projected the Seahawks for a little less than 8.5 wins. The Vegas consensus win total for the Seahawks are 7.5. I'm on the over here. I think that Mike McDonald's going to clean up the defense a little bit, and with the talent that they have on the offense, I really do think they can pace with just about anybody. It's just a matter of if they can get some stops, a few lucky stops even on the defensive side of the ball. I think they win one or two more games, games that really people have no idea or expect them to do, especially at home, and one of the best home field advantages in the league. So Scarlet's over on the Seahawks win total. I'm over on the Seahawks win total. Beach, what's your thoughts here? What are you thinking?
What does Scarlet have?
Scarlet has 8.2.
See, I originally had under, but I am friends with Ken Walker. I call him Ken.
You're pals with Kenneth Walker?
Yeah, he went to Arlington. We're bros.
Okay.
So Harrison knows him a little bit here and there, but yeah. I'm gonna, I'll go over then. I will. I did have the under. I've changed my mind.
I think they can really make a splash at the end of the season. I think they're going to struggle at first at the beginning of the season. That's where they're especially before their bye week, it's kind of top heavy. But they open up with Denver at home. I think they can, kind of set the tone there. Go to New England, pay the Patriots. I mean, that's a hard time there. Then they hit Miami and Detroit, which will be a challenge. But then they hit the Giants. Then they hit some more challenging spots in the 49ers, Falcons, the Bills, and the Rams. Then they go into their bye week and they come out playing the 49ers, which is tough. But then they have the likes of the Cardinals twice. They have the Jets. Then they play Minnesota, Chicago, Rams again, and Green Bay. So it's going to be tough, but I'm optimistic here. I'm really optimistic.
I changed my mind again. You're going under? I'm going under. Yeah, after reading that out.
Their strength of schedule rating for last year's win percentage and for Scarlet is middle of the road. It's between 14th and 16th toughest strength of schedule. So, I mean, we're going to have some surprises, but I'm on the Seahawks bandwagon this year. I think Mike McDonald is a guy who's pretty forward thinking. As a defensive-minded coach, I think those tend to take some more heat because they're, it's always offense-centric, and those are the ones that you see, finding the most success. Like we see with Mike McDaniel, like that's the big thing now is find an offensive guru. But I think Mike McDonald, he's a pretty cerebral coach. I look forward to him making the adjustments that he needs on the defense side of the ball, and hopefully allowing the offense to thrive. I'm bullish on the Seahawks. The bear case for them is, of course, the defense, and then growing pains with their new head coach and coordinator. So, moving on. Last but not least, now this team is polarizing in a way, as they always are, seemingly. But head coach Jonathan Gannon and the Arizona Cardinals head into 2024 with some ambiguity around them, kind of some uncertainty of what this team is really going to shape up looking like. Drew Petzing is the offensive coordinator calling plays. They will have a healthy Kyler at quarterback, and of course Marvin Harrison Jr. as the new wide receiver one. They no longer have, I don't want to say that, but I think they're going to kind of change up the way that they run the offense. So with guys like Marvin Harrison and Trey McBride on the offensive side of the ball. I think they're going to really like lean into more of a pass-heavy approach, especially with Kyler back healthy. James Conner is still the RB1. They did draft Trey Benson in the draft, so he'll be healthily in the mix. Fantasy sleeper, FYI. But I expect them to kind of rotate from a more balanced to more pass heavy, and then kind of lean into like a approach where if they're going to run, they're going to maybe trust Kyler to do it with his legs, impromptu. But I think they have a lot of young talent on the outside, on the perimeter. Before I kind of get into the nuances of the offense and defense and to some of the numbers in the stats speech, just where your head's at with this Cardinals team heading into 2024, and what you think.
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty excited for this Cardinals team now. They got Maserati Marv in there to complement Trey McBride and Trey Benson, James Conner, Kyler Murray, who we all forget used to be a beast before he got hurt. Then he got hurt. Yeah. And I'm really looking for a resurgence of the Cardinals here. I really don't know what to expect on the offensive side as far as how they're going to call the plays and change that up. But I know this team is really bad in general. So I don't really know what's going to happen there. The defensive side isn't going to help them at all, so they're going to have to put up some points. And but I'm excited for them. As I am the Panthers. It's the same thing here.
So you're right in the sense that the Cardinals are going to struggle with on the defensive side of the ball, just because they didn't have anybody, literally nobody last year. They had like 3 guys in total that they could build around. They were one of the worst in the leagues in offensive EPA per play allowed, actually second worst, right behind the Washington Commanders. So it's going to be a struggle for them to, I mean, of course, the only way, almost the only place that you can go is up in terms of improvement on the defensive side of the ball. So I, of course, think Jonathan Gannon's going to be able to do that. We saw some flashes of greatness in terms of schematics from a coaching standpoint from Jonathan Gannon last year. So I think he'll at least have some sort of improvement for the defensive side of the ball. And of course, I expect improvement for the offensive side of the ball. They drafted guys like Maserati Marv and then Trey McBride. You saw his insurgence from last year. And so they brought in guys like Zay Jones. And of course, they have Michael Wilson and Greg Dortch as well on the perimeter. I want to be bullish about the Cardinals. I do think that they will improve from the team that they were last year. Now, with that being said, Scarlett has them at barely over 5 wins, and their over-under, consensus over-under is 6.5 at DraftKings, 7.5 at FanDuel. I'm taking under 7.5 at FanDuel. I've already taken it. The only reason I say that, one of the toughest schedules in the league. I see that they're like 29th based off of just pure win percentage for last year, but I'm seeing anywhere between 28 to 31 just based off of these model-based projections in terms of strength of schedule. Let me just read out to you verbatim their schedule, Beach. They go to Buffalo to play the Bills first week of the season. Then they travel home. They play the Rams at home. They play Detroit at home, and then Commanders at home. They go to San Francisco and play the 49ers, and then subsequently after they go to Green Bay and play the Packers. Then they play the Chargers at home. Then they travel to Miami and play the Dolphins. Then they play the Bears. Then they play the Jets. Then they have a bye week. Then they play Seattle, Vikings, Seattle again, Patriots, Panthers, Rams, 49ers. The schedule before the bye week is absolutely atrocious. I would hate to have to face off, 10 straight weeks of near grueling matchups, especially on the road like that. Starting your season off in Buffalo is very much less than ideal. The only game that I have the Cardinals projected with a 50% probability or greater to win the game is the Commanders in week 4. Everything else is either 49% or below. So it's going to be a grueling season for the Cardinals in the sense of, just trying to scrap for wins. They're going to really have to try and prioritize the home games, especially. Again, I want to be bullish. I am bullish on the Cardinals. I expect them to improve from last year, but in terms of strictly speaking from a over, under, and win total perspective, I think 7.5, 8 wins is just a little too high for my just from looking at the schedule that they have to face and the holes that they still have on the defensive side of the ball. So their odds to win the division are 13-1. I like the Seahawks at plus 750 just because I do think that they have a little more pieces in line to at least make a run for the division. Of course, I think the 49ers are going to win easily, but, the value is in the Seahawks. I don't find much value in the Cardinals or anywhere else really in this division. Do you have any conflicting arguments against that, or what's your head out there after hearing that?
No, I mean, what they win? They win 2 home games last year. Is that what they won?
Not much. They did win that surprising game against Dallas, one of the more fun games of the regular season, actually. Mm-hmm. So if we look at their 2023 performance, let me pull this up. The Cardinals 4-13 record last year. They won just 2 games at home and then 2 away from home. They lost every game in the NFC West, 0-6, and then went 3-9 in the NFC overall. In one possession games, the Cardinals were 2-5, and they were victorious only once in games decided by a field goal or less. So,
yeah, I mean, just looking at that, man, and just how, it's just one season past that. Obviously, I'm going to take the over on this win total, obviously, because I believe. And,
he's a believer.
It really is not intelligent of me to say that, but I'm going to stick with it. Now, I do think under 7.5, but there's some 6.5 somewhere. Saw
there's a 6.5 on DK, and I think you can actually find there was an offshore book. I saw 5.5, but I try and keep these numbers with some of the bigger books, more consensus numbers, just so I'm not, nobody's questioning me where I get my numbers. So yeah. Hey, I like it.
I'm going over 6.5. That's what I'll take.
They have the pieces on the offensive side of the ball to make a splash, like I said. Sure. And I think that I am bullish on the Cardinals. I think they're going to, improve from last year. I 100% do, especially with Kyler Murray healthy and playing all of the games, comparatively speaking to a backup last year. So I expect improvement, but man, 8 games worth in this schedule, I'm not fully buying into them at that capacity yet.
Yeah, completely agree. 7 though?
Yeah. Right in the middle.
Right in the middle. So we both win,
Yep. So, okay. Well, hey, that wraps it up for the NFC West. Guys, we appreciate you tuning in here. We'll, of course, be back with some more divisions as the summer goes on. So, informal. Again, we always love to just break down the teams from our perspective, what we see in the numbers, what we saw from last year, and some key changes heading into 2024. So we appreciate you guys watching, and we will see you guys next week.